A meticulous cook befriends her former celebrity neighbor but later forms a destructive bond with her. In apartment number 301, an obsessive chef named Amy Elwood pretends to star in her own show entitled Amy's Food for Love. As she makes chocolate souffle, she engages with an imaginary audience. However, a sudden knock on the door interrupts her moment. As the woman looks through the peephole, she sees Detective Reynolds, who's interested in asking questions about her missing neighbor in apartment 302, a former child star named Saffron Nelson. During the interrogation, the investigator inquires about the chef's relationship with the ex-celebrity. In response, Amy reveals that she and the former actress looked out for each other, implying they were friends. When Reynolds asks if Saffron has shown signs of distress before her disappearance, the cuisine expert shares that her neighbor appeared fine when they had dinner the past week. Upon hearing this, the investigator notes her lack of concern, but she responds by implying that the former child star's disappearance may be intentional. As they continue their discussion, the detective asks the chef for more details about her dinner with the ex-celebrity, particularly if they dined or she cooked for her. In response, the culinary artist brings out her notebook, where she keeps track of every meal she prepares. She then recalls serving venison loin with parsnip gratin and onion confit to Saffron on their last dinner together. When the investigator asks if the former actress had other friends, Amy reveals that her neighbor lived a solitary life, implying that she's clueless if she had friends that the investigator can interrogate. Before leaving, the detective hands his calling card to the chef, asking her to contact him just in case she has new information. Following this, Reynolds enters Saffron's apartment for further investigation. There he sees her old movie posters and beautiful photos. The private eye then discovers an article on the table and reads it aloud. Amy, who follows him into the apartment, suddenly interrupts his reading. She shares that the former actress wrote advice columns when she was tired of acting and dependent on others. Upon hearing this revelation, the detective suspects that the ex-celebrity's disappearance might be because of self-harm. When Reynolds asks why Saffron didn't have a significant other, the chef shares that her neighbor never answers when men call her, implying that the missing woman avoids romantic opportunities. She also adds that these phone calls bothered her fiancé Fred. On the day that Amy moved into her apartment, she complained about the low height of her kitchen countertop, pointing out that she needed it to be taller for her cooking standards. Before leaving for work, the prospective husband promised the meticulous chef they'd finish their kitchen soon. Suddenly, a disguised Saffron departed from her apartment 302, getting the couple's attention. As a friendly gesture, the chef tried to start a conversation and asked if her neighbor was a model. However, the ex-celebrity just looked at her and walked towards the elevator, leaving the culinary artist curious. Later, Amy checked the mailbox and saw a magazine for the woman across her flat. Instead of giving it to her, she took it inside her place. Afterward, the cook called her future husband and reminded him to get home by 8 for dinner. While preparing the meal, she flipped through the reading material and discovered that the woman next door was a columnist. That evening, Fred arrived home late and apologized to his partner by giving her flowers. As he greeted his pet African Grey, Amy informed her future spouse that she liked the adjusted countertop but thought the lighting was wrong. In response, he pointed out that it looked fine but advised her to call the electrician if she was still unconvinced. During dinner, the meticulous chef interrogated her soon-to-be husband about her cooking. Following this, they spent an intimate time together at the dining table, unaware that the busy Saffron could hear them. As the couple continued to make love, they accidentally pushed the plate, causing it to fall on the ground. Because of this, Amy interrupted their private bonding to check the broken silverware immediately. As she picked up the pieces, she pointed out that she needed to glue them back together since it's from her favorite set. Meanwhile, the columnist took note of the disrupted intimacy in her laptop. In the present, Reynolds expresses confusion after hearing the chef's story and wonders why Saffron left, especially when she was starting to get back on her acting career. When the cook mentions that her neighbor is shy about leading roles, the investigator notes her interest in the missing woman's profession. However, before Amy can respond, her oven beeps, prompting her to return to her apartment and leave the detective with suspicion. In the past, the chef awakened when she heard a woman arguing with someone. She followed the sound and reached Saffron's apartment, where she learned that her neighbor was rehearsing lines. As the columnist got tired of reading her script, she lay down on the couch and recalled her life as a child actress. Back then, her mom Sharon would push her to act even though she was crying out of frustration. The following morning, Amy woke up and saw Fred preparing for his office. When she asked him to spend more time with her, the man politely declined, reasoning the urgency of his work project. Shortly after her spouse left, the chef knocked on her neighbor's door and gave her the magazine. She then introduced herself, and the woman responded with her name. Upon learning that her neighbor was the famous child actress she idolized, she excitingly returned to her apartment and watched one of her movies. Later, Amy received a call from her mother who wanted her to maintain her figure so her fiancé wouldn't leave him. Shortly after, the chef headed to the market to purchase ingredients for her next meal. Following this, she called her fiancé, but he rejected the call as he was busy subtly flirting with his colleague Rebecca. As Amy walked home, she spotted Saffron in the city and followed her to an audition. Inside the establishment, the actress met the casting director, who rejected her because she preferred a younger person to play the role. Disappointed, the former child star went home and laid on the floor. Meanwhile, Fred, laughing with his coworker, finally answered the call from his fiancée, who wanted him home at 9 for dinner. While eating that night, Amy interrogated her future husband about her cooking again. However, when she noticed the man focused on feeding his pet African Grey, the chef thought he was no longer interested in her meals. Upon hearing this, Fred pointed out that life wasn't always about food. This statement offended the cuisine expert, who asserted she spent many hours preparing his meal. He suggested she could make simple dishes instead because he was tired of her constantly asking him how the food tasted. When Amy noted how much her fiancé had changed, the man explained that he wanted her to get a life outside of cooking. However, the chef only brought up her dream to star with a live studio audience in her cooking show, pointing out that preparing meals is her passion. Later, when Fred fell asleep, the cook woke him up and served him dessert because he barely ate dinner. Following this, she initiated to spend intimate time with him, but he rejected her advances. After the man went to their bedroom, his phone rang on the couch, grabbing Amy's attention. Upon checking the messages, the chef discovered that her fiancé had made dinner plans with Rebecca at her previous workplace's restaurant that coming Friday. Following this, the heartbroken woman finished half her dessert and brought the other to Saffron's door. However, the actress spent all night in her room, still preoccupied with her audition rejection. That Friday, Amy went to her previous workplace and entered the kitchen, where she saw her former colleague Lucas. Walking toward the dining area, she witnessed her future spouse feeding Rebecca a dish she cooked at home. Upon confirming her fiancé's affair, the devastated woman thought she wasn't enough to make him happy. Following this, the heartbroken chef released her anger by pretending she was starring in her cooking show. During their one-year engagement, a vengeful Amy cooked Fred's African Grey and served it to him as dinner, leading to their separation. The following day, the chef knocked on Saffron's door and tried to invite the former child star for a meal. However, the woman declined because she had a busy schedule but thanked her for the dessert the other night. Upon hearing this, the excited Amy attempted to interrogate her idol about what she thought of the food. However, the columnist thanked her instead of responding and closed the door. In the present, Reynolds followed the chef to her apartment, where she prepared her chocolate souffle. He inquires how Saffron could write intimate advice if she were a hermit, prompting the cook to assume that maybe her idol had a partner. Following this, Amy serves the dessert to the investigator. However, he refused it because he had a medical condition. Because of this, the woman takes the plate and eats the sweet treat. As Reynolds observes the chef eat, he asks her if she has a significant other because she can cook good meals. However, the woman shares that she got rid of her last partner. After calling it quits with Fred, Amy pretended to be in her cooking show whenever she prepared her meals. Afterwards, she knocked on Saffron's door to deliver her delicious cooking. However, the columnist politely declined, pointing out that she had already eaten dinner. Persistent, the chef abruptly entered her idol's home so she could place the food on her table. She then expressed her admiration for the former child star, sharing that she watched her shows after dinner when she was young. Upon hearing this, Saffron appreciated Amy's statement. However, she continued to excuse herself because she had to return to writing. However, this didn't faze the chef, so she took a spoonful of the dish and fed it to her idol. The columnist gave in and finally tasted the food, which she found delicious. Upon hearing this, the delighted cook expresses how grateful she was that they were neighbors. Before leaving the ex-actress, the culinary artist advised her not to let the cream on the food sit for too long so that it won't lose its flavor. After Amy left, Saffron took the food and put it inside the fridge, joining the dessert from the other day. Meanwhile, the chef watched her idol's film before she slept. The following day, the columnist stared at a beautiful dress in a boutique. On the other hand, the cook pretended to be a TV chef and talked to an imaginary audience as she prepared a flavorful meat dish. That night, Amy knocked on her neighbor's door again to give her food. She then entered the ex-actress's apartment and engaged with her despite knowing she was busy working. When Saffron appreciated her kind gesture but mentioned that she wasn't hungry, the chef tried to convince her by pointing out that women who don't eat red meat have weaker peak experiences. Upon hearing this, the ex-actress laughed and admitted she didn't eat meat. Suddenly, the columnist received a call from her agent, who told her about her failed audition. Meanwhile, Amy read a quote in the writer's notebook about getting laid first thing in the morning. After Saffron grabbed her notebook, the chef complimented her articles and wondered why she didn't consume meat as someone who wrote about intimate advice. In response, the former child star reasoned that half of the Indian people were vegetarian and didn't have problems in private moments. Upon hearing this, the persistent Amy took a spoonful of the lamb meat and tried to feed the columnist to prove her point. However, the polite writer excused herself and headed to the bathroom to throw up, prompting the chef to leave. When she faced the mirror, Saffron recalled her mother, who restricted her diet to maintain her figure as a teenage star. Then, her mom introduced her to a producer named Bob, who started showing his ill intentions toward her. Overwhelmed by her memories, the columnist returned to the living room and disposed of the lamb meat in the trash bin. The following morning, Amy met her mother at the public market and told her about her ex-actress neighbor. When her mom expressed interest in meeting the ex-celebrity, the chef pointed out that the writer had a private life and didn't want to be disturbed. Meanwhile, Saffron decided to take a break from her writing job and went out alone to watch the sunset. That night, Amy watched a scene from her neighbor's old movie, Twilight Pearl, where the actress was kissing the man who proposed to her. Suddenly, the chef imagined herself being her idol's co-actress in the film, and they giggled as they ate an oyster dish. The following day, she pretended to be a TV chef and cooked a bouillabaisse for Saffron, as inspired by her film. The cook then headed to her neighbor's flat to give her the meal she prepared. The chef then expressed how important it was to have someone to talk to when someone was under a lot of pressure. Sensing that Amy had a problem, Saffron asked her neighbor if her partner left her. In response, the culinary expert clarified that she was the one who left her fiancé because he was unresponsive to her needs. A moment later, the cook showed the former actress the oyster dish inspired by her film. However, the columnist revealed that she didn't eat the food in the movie, which surprised the culinary expert. Upon learning this, Amy got more motivated to let the writer taste her food. After feeding her idol, the chef politely left the dish and exited the door. Once the cook left, Saffron immediately headed to the sink to remove the oyster in her mouth. Back in her apartment, the culinary expert finished the remaining oysters to herself and then thought of cooking more meals for the columnist. Over the following days, she left different dishes on the writer's doorstep. However, the ex-celebrity didn't eat them. One morning, as Saffron was about to take her trash out, she encountered Amy in the hallway. When the chef saw the garbage bag, she immediately felt disappointed upon realizing that the columnist never ate what she prepared for her. Out of anger, the cook pulled the former child star back to her flat and forced her to eat the food she was about to throw away. In response, the ex-actress explained that her body rejected the food, revealing that she was bulimic. She clarified that there was nothing wrong with the chef's cooking. She just had an eating disorder. Following this, the former celebrity shared that her family had taken advantage of the wealth she got from acting. Upon hearing this, the chef asked what she could do to help. In response, the columnist mentioned that she wanted the cook to be someone who didn't need anything from her and let her be alone. Despite this, Amy asked for another chance to prepare a dish for her. However, Saffron pointed out that the chef had difficulty understanding other people's boundaries. Still, the cuisine expert insisted on making a healthy ginger soup and invited her for dinner the following night. Saffron accepted the invitation the following day and took a few spoons of the delicious soup. Afterward, the ex-actress kindly asked her to run the lines of her script so she could practice for a role she wanted to audition for. After their role-playing, Amy massaged her neighbor and assured her that she would get the job. Shortly after, the cook revealed that she browsed YouTube and gave her a copy of her audition tape as a preteen. Following this, Saffron watched the clip in her apartment. As she saw her young self singing, she couldn't help but shed some tears. The next day, Amy accompanied the columnist to her audition and wished her luck. However, during her casting call, she realized that one of the judges was her former producer Bob, who exploited her as a teenager. Upon seeing the old man, the traumatized writer immediately backed out of her tryout and returned to her apartment. Looking at her old movie poster, the disappointed columnist burned her image's eyes using her cigar while recalling how her mom told her that she did everything just to make her a star. That night, a worried Amy entered Saffron's apartment and saw her neighbor on the floor. As the chef approached her, the columnist awakened and asked her to do her a favor, pointing out that she was the perfect person for the task. Before revealing her request, they spent an intimate time together, and the cook confessed her love for her. In the present, the cook served Reynolds meat and potatoes after he rejected the chocolate souffle. After taking a bite, the investigator investigator mentions that he did a background check and confronts her about her non-existent cooking show. The culinary expert then reasons that it'll be on television soon. Following this, the detective shows him the feather of Fred's African grey, revealing that he knows about her serving the bird to her ex-fiancé. However, Amy pointed out that the winged creature flew away, implying that Saffron did the same thing. Upon hearing this, Reynolds exclaims that people don't just disappear for no reason. When the chef challenges him to search the house, the investigator suddenly notices the culinary expert's utensils and sink with blood. Unbeknownst to the detective, Saffron had tasked the chef to end her life, and she willingly did so because of her love for her. Realizing that he has eaten the ex-actress's remains, the private eye exits the apartment in silent shock. After the investigator leaves, Amy returns to her regular programming and pretends to be in her cooking show while preparing her night's dishes. Afterward, she imagines having a dinner date with a former child star, who finally appreciates and eats her food.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.